Welcome all to this tech talk about gamification. All of the audience will be on mute, but please don't hesitate to ask your questions in the questions box of GoTo. We will pick them up and make sure they get answered. Today our guest is Doug Ross. He's a national solutions architect for AI, automation and emerging tech in the US. Hi Doug, welcome, good you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
So gamification, I think we all have an idea about what it is, but what's actually the textbook definition for it?
Yeah, so, great question. Level set a little bit about what gamification is. We think about having a goal in mind with games. We want to win the game or we want to achieve the most points. But we think about there are rules associated with it, so we're each on a level playing field, and we have the ability to influence play. We can make specific decisions that will guide us and maybe change the trajectory of how we're playing the game or engaging in this gamified activity. And finally, the response that we want to get personally is we want to get some kind of recognition, and these could be reward points. These could be achievements, badges, and so on. But that's kind of the textbook definition of what gamification is.
And could you show us what this looks like in practice?
Absolutely. So for those of you familiar with Reddit, Reddit is a very, very popular set of communities. And what Reddit has done is they have leveraged gamification in a whole, just a variety of different ways, where you achieve certain, what they call karma points based upon your posts, your comments, your activities. You can give gifts, virtual gifts, you can receive virtual gifts. And Reddit, of course, is a multi-billion-dollar property because they've harnessed the power of gamification and those kinds of recognition to really drive a lot of engagement and then retention of their users, because the users want to come back day after day and see how many points they have and see what levels of achievement and what kinds of awards they've received. So I think if we think about a community, trying to build community, Reddit is a wonderful example in real life of gamification.
And this doesn't only work for digital, right? There's brick and mortar store who use the same elements and the same mechanics.
Exactly. So you think about, for example, we many of us used to have these little punch cards where we go to the coffee store and you would, each coffee you bought, you would get a little punch card punched. And over time, you would get a free coffee. And so you think about that's an element of gamification where you're engaging in this activity in order to achieve a reward. If you think about credentials here, this is a site called Credly, and it takes your real world achievements, in this case, maybe a Safe Agilist award, and it can manage those credentials for you. Code Academy is another example that's kind of merging the physical with the virtual, where various achievements that you've been able to hit based upon your work on Code Academy and your various learnings. So yeah, I think there's a really interesting capability of merging this with, let's say, a brick and mortar retail establishment, and then also interweaving that with the digital experience.
What's the motivation for businesses? So why would you want to use gamification as a business?
Yeah, that is the most important point, I think. There are significant business cases and returns that we've seen in the past. And these are a few different case studies and real examples of pretty significant business results. So you can see on the left, Nike in 2006 introduced Nike Plus, which is the personalized fitness tracker. And if you look at the results, that's pretty startling results, where 33% share increase here from 47 to 61. We all, many of us are familiar with the Starbucks loyalty program, the mobile app that was associated with it. The way Starbucks looks at it, they believe that is those kinds of reward programs and loyalty programs have incrementally benefited in $3 billion a year in revenue. So that's a big number even for Starbucks. And then U.S. Army's really interesting case study where they had engaged in traditional marketing outreach for recruiting, and it was very expensive. It was about $6 per recruit. And they created this Doom, like, you know, at the time it was more like Doom or Duke Nukem, these first-person shooter games, and they were able to reduce, as you can see, the cost of contact really, really significantly through this gaming engine called America's Army. And these are just three of the major examples, but there are many, many that, you know, I think that we can all think of with respect to loyalty programs and other sorts of engagement mechanisms that folks are using.
Yeah, so there's huge business cases in there. And I would like to know from our audience, they can go to menti.com and tell us what their favorite loyalty program or rewards program is. You can go to menti.com and use this code 71816133 or use the QR code and tell us what's your favorite. It will come out as a word cloud, and it usually takes a while, but you can type in anything you like, so no multiple choice here. And we'd be interested to see what you think, and if these are going to be a lot of different ones, or maybe you all like Starbucks. I see we have quite some folks from US. Here we go. Starbucks is in. Yeah.
I like the Dogecoin.
Yeah. Flying Blue is popular. I just received my new silver card from KLM. I won't be using it, but it's good to know that I'm still on their mind.
True.
Aubuchon Hardware. Do you know that, Doug?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
Interesting. I have to look some of these up.
See if you want to participate.
Precisely.
We'll give it just a bit of time. Here we go.
Starbucks.
Okay, Bitcoin. Would you qualify Bitcoin as a rewards program?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. A little bit of gamification to the cryptos, that's for sure.
Yeah. Espresso House. So some competition here for Starbucks. I see that Joseph put in the question box Clarion Hotels.
Interesting.
I think there's a lot of hotels that have these rewards programs, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the big chains
yeah.
have a lot of interesting gamification elements.
Okay, let's move on. I think these are some interesting examples, but I would like to know actually how it works. So what's the actual mechanics, or maybe even the psychology of gamification?
No, that's a great question, and there are actually some interesting, research, academic research associated with this. And a simplistic view is to the left-hand side. Really, and you can see that it's sort of a cycle of emotions where we're trying to influence the player state of mind, and we do so through player behavior. Again, the user is able to make choices. They can maybe, if you think about Reddit, they can upvote or downvote an article, and they might get points for making a comment. And those points are added through the mechanics, the rules of the game. And together, this entire cycle is meant to influence the emotions and the the engagement of the individual. The more, I'd say the more detailed view is to the right, where we can see that the actions of each agent are influencing game dynamics. There are consequences to those changes. Those influence the mechanics themselves, and it can influence the objects behind the mechanics. And of course, there's that cycle of, as you do certain things, and maybe you have a comment that's on Reddit that is voted up many, many times. Emotionally, there's a satisfaction associated with that, that, wow, my comment received 100 upvotes. That's really neat. And so that's the kind of self-reinforcing behavior that, like the Journal of Business Research, we can see here, has outlined as a powerful tool that supports the gamification view, and why it's so important for adoption and so on for many applications.
But then how do you make the step to using this as a business and actually building a business case for it? Where would you begin?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that there are a couple of standardized tools that folks use. One is called a Gamification Canvas, and we'll walk through an actual example in a moment. But we can see that you can see the numbers. We'll kind of share how you use the canvas, where you articulate benefits. You say, okay, what are we actually trying to achieve here? Are we trying to achieve, let's say, customer retention? And then we determine who the players are. You might have folks who are long-term customers, and they have a different persona than someone who might be a prospect that you're trying to acquire. And then we want to understand the behaviors. That's box number 3. And the behaviors then can influence our aesthetics. We can have various game components that we can render to show the levels of achievement and the scoring and things like that. Number 5 is dynamics of what occurs during gameplay. And 6 are the actual components themselves, the data elements. What are those data elements? Let's say reward points, for example. And then the mechanics behind that would indicate, hey, at a certain level of reward points, I get a badge, for example. And those would be the mechanics. And then we can think about the platforms. And again, these don't have to be all digital platforms. These can be brick and mortar platforms. And we could think about a mobile app, a website, a portal for a insurance agent. All of these would be perhaps relevant platforms for gamification. And then finally, when we think about the cost, now that we've articulated the elements of what we're trying to do, now we can weigh the costs, number 9, versus the benefits, number 1. And we can determine what the business case is based upon the kinds of levers that we're trying to pull here with respect to, let's say, customer retention or new customer acquisition, those kinds of things. But this would be the standard, this would be the kind of standard way to go about it. And there are a couple different ways, but I think a gamification canvas is pretty easy to understand, and yet does provide the design and the business case associated with gamification.
Yeah, it seems like a good tool to get a high-level understanding and know how to move forward. Could you show us an example of a filled-out one? So an example
Sure.
for one particular case, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we can see here, so I kind of made up this example, but I think it's probably highly relevant in the world that we're living in, where talent is really hard to achieve. So imagine that we want to gamify a recruiting situation where we're trying to ensure that our recruiters are recruiting highly qualified individuals, we're retaining those individuals, and we can obviously assign revenues to those. It's very expensive, so we want to make sure that retention is part of our equation. And so we've created kind of this revenue side, this benefit side, that is all about getting the right people into the organization. And we can go to players. If we go to the next one, we can see that there are several different personas we've identified. We have the long-term master recruiters, emerging stars who are high potentials, and maybe new recruiters who need help. So then we think about, okay, now we've identified these different segments of players. what are we going to do with respect to behavior? How are we going to influence behavior? And the and if we could go both to behavior and aesthetics, apologies for that, because those are going to go side by side. So we have a variety of challenges, incentives, and contests if we think about that in various levels that the recruiters can achieve. And recruiters, like many of us, are very competitive, and they want to achieve at these levels, and they want to maybe get ahead of the next person that they might be competing against. And we can actually, the behaviors that we're trying to understand are what recruiting activities by job grade, for example. How many folks are getting referrals? How many folks are retaining well, making sure that the folks they're getting are not going to be flight risks immediately. And so you can imagine that these are pretty important from a recruiting standpoint. And so the dynamics of the game would really, or the gamified aspects of this would be associated with let's say the visualization of your progress, where, hey, I was able to recruit somebody. Now I've seen a set of points assigned to me. Maybe they're virtual reward points. We can have little games or mini contests, incentive programs, like in this week, who's going to, basically who's going to close the most. And you can imagine, not just for recruiting, this sort of thing works really well with sales, wherever you have competition. And so the components, what kind of components and mechanics do we have with this? Well, we can have leaderboards, points. We can have winners for a given time period, a weekly or a monthly recruiting contest, for example. And so the mechanics, the data domains behind that, are the points and achievement levels and so on. And then these virtual components are, kind of your rewards as a recruiter. And then what are the platforms that this would be relevant for? Again, these could be brick and mortar. These could be, you could, decorate an office, for example, with some awards. And but we can also operate in the virtual and the digital domain with desktops and laptops and mobile devices. And then finally, we can think about the costs associated with it, because we have to have both the costs and the benefits. And we think about, well, geez, if we were going to do something pretty minimalistic, we might just have a very simple integration with Salesforce. And we might have, some capabilities of integrating the data that we already track with respect to recruitment. And we're going to maybe show those in a leaderboard. And so we can estimate what each of those components are going to cost. And now we have a real business case. We have a cost-benefit analysis with our revenues on the right and the costs on the left, and we can determine, hey, is this investment really worth making? And to me, this is, a typical way that you would proceed through articulating the benefits of gamification for your application. And one other thing I wanted to mention that I think is interesting for anybody who's involved with app dev, Ed Societti and Capgemini, is this is a differentiator. This is something from a thought leadership perspective that you can bring to your clients to say that not only are we thinking about your application, let's say, and it could be as, I don't want to say mundane, but it could be as seemingly innocuous as underwriting in the insurance domain. There's a lot of things you could do with underwriting to do gamification. And you can actually, I think you could actually generate business cases associated with a lot of these back office and front office processes related to gamification that are going to drive benefits that wouldn't necessarily be obvious to clients. So to me, this is potentially a differentiator. So as you're talking to clients, you're thinking about engagement, you're thinking about adoption, maybe you're working on a digital portal of some sort for salespeople, or a digital portal for end consumers. This is something as a value add you can throw in as a concept to determine if it's relevant for your client. And potentially, in my view, it's a differentiator for you to bring this to a client to say, we're thinking about other ways to engage your stakeholders.
Yeah, and to me, it seems like something that's of interest for a lot of our clients as well. That needs to be maybe more top of mind.
Yes, Precisely.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's a great point. It's something that we all have to think about because we're all getting we're getting bombarded. We all have social media and communities and this and that, and yet many times we go to an enterprise application and it is routine, mundane, etc. Can we make that more fun to use? And can we get better engagement? Can we get better cycle time? Can we get better relationship management with our stakeholders and business partners? And I believe the answer is yes, with this kind of tooling.
Yep. A couple of weeks ago, we had this tech talk with Insided, with their company who make community software. They make a lot of use of gamification as well. And they showed a couple of examples that were really striking, that we got a lot of reactions to, of users of a telco, one user of a telco giving thousands of answers to questions about telephone wires, Wi-Fi, just things that doesn't seem that extraordinary of interest, but for him it was really engaging to be the person who got to the right answer first through these elements of gamification in their platform. It was a great example.
No, you're absolutely right, and what you mentioned is to me is very integral to gamification, which is building community, and it's not required by any means that you have a community or a discussion board or this kind of collaboration platform, but it definitely aligns with gamification. If you think about building community, at the end of the day, we want to have folks who are motivated to do their job, let's say recruiting or sales or whatever, but at the same time, wouldn't it be great as a bonus to have fun doing so, where people are actually coming to work every day and they're fired up because maybe gamification has made their day-to-day just a little bit more fun and interesting and competitive. So yeah, great point.
Cool. So in the canvas, you showed that there's elements and mechanics, and before you explain more about them, I'd like to ask our audience what they think are the most commonly used elements in gamification. So we have another Menti question for that. You can go to menti.com and use the same code or the QR code, of course, and the code is on screen here again. And maybe Doug, you could give a short explanation to the elements that are not self-explanatory.
Yeah, no, excellent. So customization is the ability for you to control your environment more effectively based upon levels of achievement. Badges, I think, pretty self-explanatory, that you can maybe get a gold badge if you've gotten a certain achievement. Challenge is, is a way to have a journey that's just not a linear journey. You could have little contests or quizzes, however you term a challenge, and that can help unlock other capabilities in your gamified experience. Levels, I think, pretty obvious, where we can have different tiers of users, and maybe I've gotten my first achievement badge, but there's 3 other badges that I can get to in those different levels. And so the levels and badges can be very complementary. And then, of course, various competitions, and I think that's pretty obvious. But
our audience seems to like badges till now.
Yeah.
Badges, customization, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still moving a bit. Competition is moving up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, badges still stays in front, I think, here. Challenges, levels, competitions all have 2. I'd be interested to know what you mentioned some research, Doug, that has been done to these elements, and what are the most commonly used throughout the years. Could you show us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the Journal of Human Computer Studies, and in 2020 they did an analysis of the most frequently used game components. And what you can see, it's a little bit, the bar chart's a little bit misleading, but we can see in the lighter blue, those are the more recent recent data that they've gathered. And we can see that customization is one of the top capabilities where you're able to customize the environment based upon levels. Badges, the people who voted for badges were spot on in levels, and but you can see that these are the most common characteristics. And you know, why I think this is important is gamification can be a very wide-ranging topic, and you can imagine that there are many different tools at your disposal to be able to take advantage of. So what are the most popular ones that seem to be engaging? To me, this is very valuable because you could say, if I'm going to do a minimum lovable product, or I'm going to do a MVP or a proof of concept or a proof of value here, what are the real components that I think are going to be most attractive to the community of users that I'm dealing with? And so to me, that kind of research is very valuable because we can see that we're taking advantage of the learnings from many different prior gamification approaches, and we can choose to leverage that if we so desire.
And these are still a lot. So if I'd like to start some gamification in any application, I think I'd like to know how I could group them, or what are the underlying mechanics of it.
Excellent question. So how do we make this real? If we're thinking about, we put on our application development hat and we think about how to make this real, there are a bunch of different data domains, and here are about 10 different data domains that we've identified that kind of can underpin the beginnings of a real gamification ecosystem. Obviously, you have scores, ranks and levels, associated with ranks and levels, badges and trophies that recognize milestones. There are the achievement of team or individual tasks together. We can do unlocks where we get to a certain point and we're able to unlock an activity or a capability. We have, certainly dashboards and progress indicators that you can imagine that if we're 75% to our sales goal, wouldn't it be cool if we had a meter or a chart of some sort to indicate that, motivating us every day when we log in? The customization of personal profiles and avatars, obviously that's important. And so you can see that there are these various data domains, and again, doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be, you could pick up one or two of these data domains and say, we're going to start there, and we're going to gamify our application using these data domains with the hope that if we do get engagement and the adoption that we think we'll get, now we're able to actually improve and increase the leverage for these different components and continue to extend that architecture.
So this makes it a lot easier to start and to make choices at the start, right? But of course, you should begin with the specific user that you're targeting. And then how would you design for a user?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great question. And there are tools that are out there. One is called an empathy map, and it really takes a user persona and allows us to think about their emotions and what they are feeling. You can see at lower right, what are their internal emotions? And in this case, this might be the Starbucks reward customer. They're, very impatient, they're overwhelmed, they have a lot of things to do. On top right, you can see these are things that they don't say, they will not articulate, they won't answer a survey to say this. These are the things that internally they're thinking to themselves. I don't have time for long lines. I have to get my caffeine. I want my coffee. And then what they'll actually say to the left of that, what they will actually answer a survey question to, or actually say to someone, yep, love to use my mobile phone. I love convenience, love going to pick up my coffee in the morning, seeing some of the people from work, that kind of thing. And then their actual activities. And so this is not as you can see on the right, this isn't a replacement for a journey map. It's not a replacement for persona generation. What it is allows you to try to get inside the head of a particular persona so that we can understand their motivations and help build out that gamification canvas. So this is just another tool to complement that canvas so that we're really trying to understand the motivations and the behaviors that we're seeing.
Yep, so to make the mechanics of the gamification you're designing fit with the, well, psychology of the user.
Precisely.
Okay. Good. Then once this is there, what would a typical architecture look like?
Yeah, it can be very wide-ranging. So here's an example that I think people find interesting of a very large-scale gamification architecture for a retailer. And so this is the big kahuna. You know, this is the whole. This would be like a major implementation, and of course it doesn't have to start that way. But if you think about the long-term architecture, we can see on the left-hand side we have an ERP system. We've got a customer master data system, for example. Now we also have promotions, various incentives. Now we can integrate that with a gaming layer where we have user management, reward management, the rules of the games, how we communicate with members, that kind of thing. And we can also have interactions with the employees. And so you could have effectively employees who are aware of the rewards program that consumers are engaging in. They're able to maybe give points, give little rewards. And then there are communication channels. You might want to incentivize people to make sure that they've signed up for a particular email distribution list. And we've gamified that perhaps, and they get points for being on that distribution list. Then of course at the bottom, you can see there's some social network integration that you could do. You could even, you know, let's say on Facebook, you might want to put out a notification that I've achieved this level of badge for doing these particular things. And finally, the data at the bottom left is really interesting, which is we're trying to generate a business case. We need our KPIs. We want to make sure that we are influencing, let's say, customer behavior or stakeholder behavior. And so we want to pull that data from the gaming layer, integrate that with, let's say, our promotion system and incentive system. And now we can have a full cycle understanding of the influence that gamification has had on this particular business. And so this would be a huge, large-scale architecture. Doesn't have to be, you know, not to say at all that this is a minimum viable product, but this would be something that, you know, long-term, from a loyalty perspective, that a retailer or another large enterprise might engage in.
Something to work towards. But then, of course, we like to start small, maybe with a minimum lovable product. What could it look like?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think you asked that, I think when we were talking about this to begin with, and it was a great question. It really made me think about what is a minimum lovable product here. And I thought, okay, well, several different things came to mind. Let's think about a leaderboard. We have let's say a Salesforce instance. We have activities that we can integrate with from Salesforce, and that might be how many prospecting activities did you achieve? How many accounts did you open? How much incremental business did we do with this other existing account? And now we can use a leaderboard widget, and we can integrate with Salesforce and show that leaderboard and help motivate. You know, for example, salespeople are very competitive. They love, you know, contests and things like that. And we can use that kind of leaderboard to incentivize that activity. At right, you can see personal profile badges where we can provide, if we have control of our avatar, we can perhaps layer over our avatar a particular milestone achievement. We've gotten a certification in something. And so we have, you know, a simple badging system that we can implement. On the following panel, we have a couple of more examples. We have, think about a customer loyalty program where based upon spend or based upon repeat activity, we have either a bronze, silver, or gold level that we've achieved, and we get certain perks for that. And again, this is, you know, pretty minimalistic gaming. Again, it's an MLP, but now we're able to offer certain capabilities to the user and unlock certain things like, hey, do you get free preview to new items in the catalog, for example, or do you get free birthday gifts, or do you get extra loyalty points based upon those levels of bronze, silver, gold. So that might be a simple way to begin in terms of a loyalty program. At right is something that I think a lot of the, let's say, the new kinds of digital retailers are using. They're using these let's say, a wheel of almost a Wheel of Fortune type game, and they will do these live on Instagram. I've seen a couple of these, pretty interesting, where retailers are getting lots and lots of engagement saying, join our Instagram live. We're going to kind of, do the deal wheel, or whatever it may be called. And users seem to really like this, because by participating in that Instagram live, watching these sales contests, they can actually win stuff. And at the end of the day, it's a viral sort of activity that a lot of these digital retailers are engaging in, these kinds of contests that are truly gamified.
So it's actually quite feasible to start with a small project that delivers value almost instantly.
I believe so, yes. It does not have to be a boil the ocean. It can be a very simple beginning point, yes.
So we have another question for the audience. And it's a word cloud, so you can fill in what you like. The question is, what use cases do you see with your clients that would apply? Really curious what will appear here. Just while we're talking, I already realized how much more gamification there is in the tools that I use than I realized before. Because it's just if the design is good, you don't really realize.
No, that's so true. It's, in some ways there's, gamification just augments the experience. We may be doing some activity. Let's say I'm an underwriter, and every day I'm doing my underwriting activities. And yet, wouldn't it be interesting if there were also kind of a leaderboard for underwriters, basically best business written. I've got the most profitable business that I've underwritten, or I've done the best job with client retention. So there are, just a lot of, I think, really interesting small things that application developers and designers can think about by including elements of gamification that can really just make day-to-day things just more engaging, more fun, build adoption, and drive the kinds of activities at the end of the day that we're seeking from our stakeholders.
Oh, we have a hello world here.
Hello world.
Ah, here we go.
Nice.
Supermarket cards.
New products, discover new user needs. Yeah.
Areas to focus support on. New products. Let's see, while new things are appearing, let me ask you a question from Michiel. Do the rewards always have to have a financial value?
No.
I think we already answered it along the way.
Well, no, but it's an excellent question, because no, I think there are ways to do this with just pure virtual currency and virtual points that have nothing to do with real rewards. Certainly, you can integrate real rewards. Let's say I've gotten 500 virtual points in my own currency, and I might get a gift card for that. But I think that in many cases, some of these competitions really can just be purely virtual, purely digital, and the reward is seeing that gold badge show up next to your name, or hitting that 5,000 point level and seeing that on a leaderboard. And so a lot of this emotionally is being able to be in this competition, and it does not have to be something that we have to spend real money on. Certainly that can help engagement, but it's not the be all end all. So excellent question though.
Good. I think a couple of new ones appeared. Perfect Garden by Robots. Nudging, open innovation.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Patient engagement. It's interesting as well.
That's a really interesting one. I like that. That's a really good idea. Nudging.
Discover new user needs. Yeah, you can, of course, have ideation as well as a game element.
Absolutely good point.
We have another question from Michiel.
Mm-hmm.
Are the most used game elements changing over time? Maybe we should show the graph.
Yes, that's an excellent question too, and yes, they are. I think user behavior, as we look at that research, I think it was the Journal of Human-Computer Research. We look at that research, we can see that certain elements of games are becoming more popular, and others are becoming less so. And what we can learn from that. Yes, thank you so much. What we can learn from this chart is, over time, people have experimented with these different elements of gaming, and they have found what seems to work well, and we can see that evolution occur with the light blue, things that are moving faster over time. And so from this we can deduce, yeah, you know what, these badges, the customization, the badges, the challenges, the levels, these are all pretty important. So you could take those maybe top, let's say 7, 8, something like that, and you have a pretty good set of components that I think are going to be relevant for you, even just picking 1 or 2 of those out. But yeah, great question. And yes, over time, we do want to track what's popular and what's less so.
Another from Cyril. Can you give us an example of a game to do for an IT company which is selling software?
Well, yeah, so actually there are third-party, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, there are actually third-party gamification engines out there. If you think about gamification as a service, there are, and I'm not at all endorsing them because I think they have some of the ones I've seen have challenges too. But if you had an IT system and you very quickly wanted to maybe incorporate some gamification in there, you could leverage a gamification as a service engine. And I can pull up a couple names for you when I'm done, but that would allow you to pretty quickly say, hey, I don't want to have to write all this stuff myself. I would just want to take advantage of it, in a SaaS kind of product. And those kinds of integrations can become pretty easy with the gamification as a service approach.
And that sounds like a good way to start as well, if you want to experiment, to use this gamification as a service to start off. I hope it answered your question, Cyril.
And if not, just fire away with another question.
Yep. That was the final question we had.
Okay.
Yeah. Cyril says, okay, thanks. Another question from Sergio. He says, a core design technique in designing games is a game loop. Have you seen game loops used in gamification to get the positive psychology benefits?
Yes, exactly. And that goes back to that the cognitive view that we showed up front. It's a great question. But yes, there is the notion of that psychological loop of exactly. Of the emotions that are experienced, at bottom, and they're experienced because the dynamics and the mechanics are all feeding in a loop. And this kind of cognitive loop is showing us that as we do certain things, we get rewarded in terms of mechanics. And as we get rewarded, we tend to have, a nice experience. Hey, I just got a gold badge. Oh, you know what? My post on Reddit just got 200 upvotes. And so those are the kinds of feedback loops that we can think about when we are designing games.
Another from Frank. He asks, could you see gamification used in assessing capabilities within an organization?
Excellent question. Yes. In fact, I'm talking with a client about using gamification for, of all things, data quality. And if you think about, let's say we're trying to keep tabs on our independent agents, and I'm thinking of an insurance example. We have a bunch of independent agents, and over time, those independent agents are going to change. They're going to move to other companies. they're going to retire, the new ones are going to get hired. And what we're talking about with this insurance client is using gamification to keep that data up to date. In other words, as people are talking with their these various independent agents, and we are motivating them to keep that information up to date because it's very hard to do. And we're using the elements of gamification to have little contests to make sure people are ensuring that data is not getting too out of date, because it's very important to keep tabs on these individuals. And so, yeah, it's an excellent question. I could see a bunch of different use cases along those lines.
Cool. Questions keep coming in, so that's a good sign,
Okay,
I'd say.
no problem.
Akini asks, my experience with gamification is that I get bored quickly. How do we identify client gamification exhaustion or boredom? And how do we encourage healthy, responsible, and ethical use?
No, excellent question. So that's where the data comes into play. You know, we looked at that architecture, and it's a great observation, because if it's not done well, it's not going to influence the adoption and engagement that we want. And so the analytics are really, really important, where we are ensuring that, and we can use a variety of means to do so. If we're trying to encourage the use of a particular function in an application, we look at our Google Analytics or our Adobe Analytics, and we determine, is this really influencing the behavior the way that we want to? And so that's why it is so important to collect the data, as you saw in that architectural diagram. And from an ethical perspective, you know, this goes for anything that we do. We want to make sure that we're designing this in an ethical way, in a way that is inclusive for individuals. And you know, and that goes for everything. That's not just gamification. And so I think that's just a foundational principle that we need to operate with. And gamification, you know, is just part of that application design that we need to think about with respect to ethical behavior, inclusion, making sure that people aren't being excluded because of the game. But it's a really interesting observation and question.
And just making sure that you do the design phase right and have a short feedback loop with analytics, right? What you see happening, is it what you expected or not, and should you adapt?
Exactly.
Yes. Good. That was our final question.
Okay.
Yep. So thanks a lot, Doug. This was really interesting conversation. Well, I think it will stay in people's minds for a while. We had a good attendance as well, great interaction in the Q&A. So thank you very much again for being here. Our next tech talk will be about diversity with Tom van der Ven, a different topic altogether. And that's May 18th at 3 CET. So hope to see you all then again.